Henrietta, how was it for you when it's like so close but so far? So, your great grandfather's incredible regalia that has survived cyclones and hundreds of ceremonies and is sitting in a British museum. But oh my gosh, the British Museum are going to do an exhibition and you can get to go and see it. And it will come to Australia. How is that for you and that desire to bring it home? And it comes home, but not quite.
That was really hurtful because I was on the Indigenous Reference Group to the board of the National Museum. So I became one of the members who would go to London. But before that, we were actually exploring what was held in the museum and the exhibition which was being laid out at the British Museum. And I I went along not knowing how I was going to feel. I knew my grandfather's regalia was going to be there. As I walked through the exhibit, I walked and passed this glass box, and I was standing there. It really hit me. Tears were running down my face. And as I was standing there and watching everyone else passing through, and not just and looking at these exhibits, it was as though I was being on display and being exhibited as people were marching through and walking through and talking about it. It felt so strong, and all I could think of was, when are we going to get you back? The sweat, the tears, the blood which stained those regalia was still, I believe, part of that regalia that was standing there. We did get it back to Australia. It came back when the Encounters exhibition was held at the British at in Canberra at the National Museum. But unfortunately, we couldn't get it to come to Cairns, to come back home, where it should have been, where my people could not come down to Canberra and see it, but yet, and we couldn't get it home. That was so hurtful to know that my grandfather finally came home, but we couldn't get him way back in our country, and that was so hurtful. I spent days just going in and sitting there with him and just looking at the regalia and the photos and talked. And it was funny because on the last day of that museum exhibition, I would talk to it, knowing that he was going to be going back to London. Um, and the shadow of dark clouds suddenly came over Canberra. And I knew because Quiblum finally showed itself, Maroon, the black cloud, finally showed itself, and I realised what he was saying to me, it was okay. So my biggest quest now would be to get that his regalia back, along with many of the other exhibit that's over there. And I know that's a huge institution to crack. Um, as is with anything, we try our hardest to get what we can, because it's plagued by this idea that they own all of the materials in which they've taken from the countries which they've colonised and gone through. And so I still have a journey to take to bring it back. It rightfully belongs in our country, in Gimoy, and I will get it back. If they want to do something, they should work with us in one is bringing them back home, or exhibiting it in a way in the museum where they're bringing it to life, not something that's static, that stays and as though it's dead. Because when you think about the shields that are made, the work that goes into it, the chiseling, the moving away of the top surface of it, and chipping away at the kind of designs they want. And it's not just done that way, it's done through the song cycle and the movement of those cycle that goes in. So we don't understand the full depth of the meaning. And I think the more that anthropologists and archaeologists are told about this, the better. They need to go back into the community, learn about it and understand it. I think many work within an institution that simply has still got this systemic racism within those institutions. And we need to get to the core of that. And I think once we get to the core of that, we would be able to then manage how we would work with Indigenous people across the board and also within the institution. That is why we have to change museums law, because at the laws, the laws that really governs those institutional structures. And as long as people work in there and are confined within that institution and are protected by those laws, they will not change their position. And this is what creates the issue of discrimination, and it creates issues of systemic and institutional racism within those institutions. The laws have to change to recognise us as being the owners of the material in which are entrusted within those institutions. And as long as they stay there without that recognition in the legal process, we will not become the guardian of our own objects and stories that are within those museums, within those artefacts and the objects that are there now.